Do do do, theme song. Do do do, I'm broke so this is my theme song. Do do do, just imagine this is an awesome theme song. Do do, theme song. Hello, welcome to Left of the Box's first episode of Let's Talk. This is where I take a deep dive into an issue and give my take on it. If you are new to the channel, which at this point is pretty much everyone, please remember it's important to feed the algorithm God. You do that by sacrificing a click over the like button and one over the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Also, please help me grow this channel by becoming a Patreon. That's how you can give me money so I can eat and do other things to live and keep making videos. Link in the description box below. Today I'm going to provide a different perspective of what happened to the American population and why so many of them still voted for Trump. It's important to understand what they've been through so we can better support them while they start to recover from the trauma of the Trump presidency. The first part of my talk will be directed mostly at Americans, and guessing by the number of subscribers I have, there's a good chance none of them are from the States. So ladies, if you don't mind, please send this link down to your American boyfriends. It would help me out a lot. What happens down there has a huge effect on us here in Canada, and I'll put that into context after I speak to the situation in the States. The entire population of America has been in a domestic abusive relationship with their government. This has been going on much longer than the past 4 years. All the Trump presidency did was ramp it up to 12 on a scale of 10. And like many domestic abuse situations, people sometimes need someone from outside the relationship to offer perspective and spell out what they see for people to recognize it for what it is. Let's go over the similarities between domestic abuse and what has been happening with the government and the population. Oh, and in case I need to actually make it clear, in this scenario, the government and authority figures are the abusers. People are being financially abused. This is done by forcing people to put up with jobs that pay starvation wages. By doing this, people are reliant on support from the abuser to survive, which the abuser holds above them and often threatens to stop. The abuser then makes people who need the support feel ashamed, like it's somehow their fault, and that they deserve to suffer because they aren't good enough. What this does is keeps people so desperate to hold on to the jobs they have, they aren't able to speak up. They can't afford to miss work to go to a protest or even vote. The same way a spouse can't escape a relationship because they don't have the money to survive outside of it. Also, when a person is under this kind of stress, they are focused on how to get their next meal, not how they can participate in changing the world. They are in a situation where they simply can't help themselves. Someone with power needs to step in and assist them or speak up on their behalf, like Bernie Sanders or members of the Squad. Then there's the emotional abuse. The abuser hurls insults, threatens violence, tells the victims to leave knowing they can't or won't, gaslights and makes people feel worthless and helpless. And at the very same time, tells their victims they love them and that they are the only ones who will protect them from other threats. They also tell their victims they should feel lucky to be with someone as wonderful as them. The abuser can make people forget who they are and twist the principles these people have to suit their needs. By doing this, the abuser changes a portion of the person's identity, and it causes a coerced loyalty that they use to further control them. It's so powerful that people being abused will become angry at those who try to point out how stupid they are for following and believing in the abuser. In fact, they become angrier with the people trying to help them because it gives them someone to direct their pain at whom they don't feel threatened by, while keeping the affection of their abuser. This is why insulting Trump supporters never leads to the situation getting any better. Parents live in fear their children will be taken away from them. This is done by literal kidnapping of migrant children at the border and Black Lives Matter protesters who were grabbed off the street and thrown into unmarked vehicles over this past year. Also, dreamers and immigrants can be taken away and locked up and held in horrendous conditions without provocation. The families of some of these people don't know where their children were sent or why they were taken. Sometimes the children are sent out of country to places where they were too young to remember, and they have no supports and suffer further violence or death. And because of the prison industrial complex and how discriminatory the system is, youths, mainly minorities, can be charged with minor crimes and be locked up for decades. There's a constant threat of physical violence. People are denied the medical help they need, which can lead to prolonged suffering and death. Even the stress of trying to get the medical help is a form of violence. Not to mention the inability to afford life-saving medication, due to the financial abuse I mentioned earlier, puts people in a position to have to pick and choose between the things they need to survive. This results in a continuous threat of death. Also, women are being forced to carry pregnancies against their will, regardless of the physical and emotional toll it takes on them. And the videos of violence are out there, and they are heartbreaking. People at protests are beaten by the people who are supposed to be protecting them. Cars drive into crowds. People are shot at, gassed, and forced into corners they can't escape from. Many people are hurt, have life-changing injuries, or are killed. When pulled over by a cop, people have to be careful of what they say so not to upset the officer, and they dare not show any disrespect. Even then, it sometimes doesn't matter. People are arrested for made-up reasons, beaten, or killed. And without a doubt, this disproportionately affects Black people. If you are Black, you can be murdered by someone with authority simply because they have the power to kill without consequence. And when you are Black, it doesn't matter what you were doing at the time. Trayvon Martin, still shy of being an adult, was walking home from a convenience store. Murdered. Philando Castile was driving in his car with his partner and daughter. Murdered. Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old child, was playing in a park. Murdered. Breonna Taylor, a young woman sleeping in her bed beside her partner. Murdered. No one should have to live in constant fear of violence and death, and no family should have to cope with the senseless loss of a loved one. But hey, white people, psst, over here, white people, do I have your attention? I've got Starbucks, huh? Okay. We need to have a little bit of a sidebar here. I know many of you seem to think police violence isn't your problem and that you don't need to worry, but if you are middle class or lower, you do. Let me explain how numbers work. Disproportionate means compared to the same number of a different group, there's a higher occurrence of violence and death. What this means is white people are beaten and killed by the police as well. And if you are middle class or lower, that risk increases. If a militarized cop is in need of a power trip and finds you in a vulnerable position, you don't get a free pass unless you have the money to pay for it. Or if a cop has been trained to shoot first and ask questions later, while your color does help you in some instances, it doesn't make you bulletproof. Just ask the family of Daniel Shaver, a white man who worked as an exterminator. At a hotel, someone mistook his equipment as a weapon and called the police. When they arrived, they forced him to crawl on his hands and knees towards them. Daniel was terrified and begging for his life. He was no threat. The cops shot him dead anyway. The video of this is horrific, not only because the cops shot him, but the way they were toying with him ahead of time. Or you can ask Golda Barton, the white mother of a white 13-year-old autistic boy. When she called the police for help because her son was having a mental health crisis, they chased him down an alley and shot him. He was no threat. Thankfully, the child survived, but his life will never be the same. So while you might not be as fearful of the police as Black people rightfully are, your life is still in danger. If you are a minority, live with poverty, have mental health issues, or are LGBTQ+, you are at higher risk of violence and death. And if you are any combination of these, there's a much higher probability you're not going to die of natural causes. So to all the white people whining about Black Lives Matter saying, it's not my problem, shut your selfish mouth. It is your problem. If you can't care out of compassion for the people who are targeted more often, you should care out of self-preservation. No one can breathe with bullet holes in their lungs. Okay, back to the topic at hand. Just like in many domestic abuse situations, the abuser is defended by other similar people in positions of power, and they rarely suffer consequences. They never think they were in the wrong and even get mad at those trying to hold them accountable, claiming to be the victim in the situation. This is what domestic abuse looks like, and this has been happening to the population of America. And the resulting behavior of the people abused looks like the following. The need to fight back and speak up, even though they know they may get hurt doing so, like going to a protest, running for office, or finding a public platform to speak their mind. Increased substance use to ease the stress and escape from a world of pain where they have no control, which leads to more addiction, overdoses, and suicides. Internalizing the abuse. They begin to believe they deserve it and that it's their fault. Denial. They block it from their minds and act like it's not happening, or they convince themselves it's not so bad and justify the abuser's actions as being reasonable responses to a situation. Then there are those people who slip into fantasy worlds, which are worse than reality to make what is happening to them seem not as bad. It also adds to the justification of what the abuser is doing because they invent reasons for the actions and put the abuser up on a pedestal, believing they are doing it for them. Not only that, they now live in a world where there is a tangible evil they can fight, giving them a sense of purpose and feeling like they're doing good versus staying in a reality they feel powerless in. And there are people who will go over the top to show their loyalty, hoping that by doing so, the violence won't be directed towards them. And of course, there are people who become foot soldiers to the abuser. The reasons for this vary. It can be because they want to control and dominate people, or they enjoy embracing and expressing the hatred within, or they'd rather be the abuser than the abusee. None of these reasons are justifiable excuses for the harm they inflict. But to help put this in further context, in a household domestic abuse, it's not uncommon for children to model the behavior of the abusers or lash out at one another. And this can be even more painful. To some extent, people expect the government to treat them badly, but when it comes from a neighbor or other people they think should have their back, there's an added sense of betrayal. Even though Trump was elected out of office, there's a possibility it will get worse before it gets better. Like all abusers, they use the tactics I mentioned to control and keep people reliant on them. They know the moment people realize their power and become independent of them, they will be kicked out of the house. So the more people gain strength, the more the abuser will fight back to try and retain control. We need to keep this in mind over the next while Trump is still in office. It's also important to know he isn't the only abuser there. It's not over. More abusers need to go. So, what does all of this mean? For one thing, with the constant stress, it makes it harder for people to cope with other stresses. The loss of a job, a loved one passing away, a relationship breakup, and so on. It hits people harder and it will take them longer to recover from it than it would if their life was going all right. Another thing is that this trauma has changed people. I think you would be hard-pressed to find an American who hasn't become something different than what they were 4 years ago. Hell, it's changed me and I don't even live there. I've had to constantly ground myself and remember where I am. So one time I went and hugged a Canadian goose. I'm not saying it was a good idea, but the free healthcare I received afterwards was a good reminder of where I was. Most of us in Canada have family, friends, coworkers, or other connections to the people in the States. One thing that confuses us and many of them was how many people still voted for Trump. But when I look at it from this perspective, it's not that surprising. How many people go back to their abusers? That's the insidious thing about it. Despite the harm the abuser inflicts, they can also make people feel needed, special, protected from bigger monsters. Makes them feel like they belong. They also make people believe this is the best they deserve and they won't get anything better with anyone else. And of course, the foot soldiers want to maintain the control they found under the abuser. But the one reason that's the hardest to reconcile in our heads is when a person loves their abuser. A child can be abused by a parent and still love their parent. A spouse can be abused and still love the other. A senior parent can be abused by the children they love. When a person loves their abuser, they are willing to tolerate more abuse, believing the abuser will change or that they can help them become a better person. Or they're fearful if they report it, the abuser will be taken out of their lives forever. I have no doubt many Trump supporters love him, even though that love is not returned. No one should ever tell a victim of domestic abuse they brought it on themselves. Just like here in Canada, we shouldn't say Americans got what they deserve. This is just one way to look at the situation in the States. Of course, no one perspective is the correct one. There are many reasons, and I'm sure history will do a thorough study of it. What I'm hoping is that this provides another way of approaching the people who were hurt or the people who are still loyal to Trump. For Trump loyalists to be deprogrammed, they have to come to terms with their own pain. They have to acknowledge the things they believed are wrong and the person they've become doesn't reflect who they used to be. When a person believes in horrible things and acts out on those beliefs and finds out later they're not true, they feel they must also be a horrible person for doing all of that, so it's safer to cling to a lie. And no one likes admitting they were wrong or that they gave up their life savings or cut friends and families out of their lives for a person who feels nothing towards them. By believing in the abuser, it justifies their actions and they feel validated when they hurt other people. And this way, they don't have to confront the pain of the broken relationships they've caused. Americans have a long road of recovery in front of them. We need to stay as compassionate as possible. Okay, let's get into how it impacts us here in Canada. Like it or not, their politics affect us, their culture influences us, and we tend to follow where they go. We also can't just ignore them. We have trade agreements. We need to work with them for environmental change. Our economies are tied together. But the absolute worst thing their politics does to us is distract us from what is happening here. We don't get to point at the States and say it's not so bad here because both of their eyes are black when we are walking around with one blackened eye ourselves. After America elected Trump, I knew it was only a matter of time before something like that happened here. I felt I had to get involved to make sure we didn't go down the same path. And when I dove in, I learned it wasn't a matter of time. It's already happening. Our liberal and conservative parties are lapdogs to corporations. They will do what benefits them over the needs of the people every time. Sure, the Liberal Party has been caught in scandals, but the party never suffers any real consequence, and the Conservative Party does the exact same thing. The main difference is they don't get caught as often because they do a better job at weeding out people with integrity. And many in the Conservative Party have started to flirt with right-wing ideals more and more to see if they can gain attention and power with it. As a consequence of all of this, we now have a housing crisis because corporate landlords are given preferential treatment. Parts of our healthcare system are being privatized. Our goals towards combating climate change are being pushed aside to favor corporations who rely on destroying the environment to make money. Our mainstream media is challenging authority less. Hard-hitting questions or confronting politicians about hypocrisy and digging for the truth during interviews is not happening as often. Unless you're with the NDP, because then how will you pay for it? Reframing questions to be more favorable towards corporate ideals is also on the rise. Systematic racism and violence against Indigenous peoples is prevalent, as demonstrated this past year by the actions of the RCMP towards the land protectors protesting at the Coastal GasLink pipeline in BC and the violent arrest of Chief Alan Adam in Alberta, which resulted in severe injuries. All charges against him were dropped because there were no grounds for his arrest in the first place. Investigations have been launched into the actions of the RCMP for both of these cases, but that brings no comfort to the peoples who have been abused by this government for generations. And for every story in the news, there are many more that are never reported on. Missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls is still a crisis. No justice for victims of residential schools. Indigenous children are taken away from their families and put into foster care at higher rates. Indigenous peoples disproportionately represent our incarcerated population. And the genocide the Canadian government has barely acknowledged is still going on. We also have our own problems with police in this country. This past year in New Brunswick, Chantel Moore, a 26-year-old Indigenous woman and mother of one, was shot and killed by police during a wellness check. When I was doing the research for this talk, I found a shocking number of similar incidences from this year alone with people from all sorts of backgrounds and different ages. People needing help, but were shot instead. As someone with mental health issues, it breaks my heart even more because I know what it's like to be in a mental health crisis. People having mental health episodes are rarely ever a threat to anyone, and with proper treatment and medication, most of them will live productive lives. But instead, all of these beautiful people were robbed from this world. There are two major problems here. One, the mental health care system in Canada needs drastic changes and supports put in place for people with mental health issues. And two, police officers should not be the ones responding to wellness checks. They are not trained for it, and the results are tragic. People with extremist views are becoming bolder. Racist outbursts are being caught on video more often. Anti-maskers and anti-vaxxers are putting people's lives in danger. And we have seen horrific actions of extremists, with the 2017 shooting at a mosque in Montreal that killed 6, and the 2018 driving rampage in Toronto that killed 10. Links to all of these stories can be found in the description box below. The fact that you can go to the Amnesty International website and find stories about Canada and petitions to sign indicates we have a lot of work to do here. I haven't come close to covering all of the issues. If you are still watching at this point, good on you and thanks. But it would take another hour to go into the detail of all the issues we're facing as a country. We need to start getting our houses in order by choosing politicians who put people before corporations and their own personal agendas. We need to have more compassion for one another. When people are in pain in this country, it can pull everyone down and change the direction we're going. We need to listen to one another to find ways of lifting each other up instead of getting to the top by stepping on those below. The good thing is, we can do better. We can change the system. We can demand our leaders look out for our best interests. I know the urge to bury your head in a bucket of tasty maple syrup and not pay attention to politics is strong. Politics present as boring, and people feel nothing will ever change, and there's nothing they can do anyway. And that is just the way our leaders like it. I'm here to remind you we have power, we have a voice, and we deserve better. Never forget, we the people are the ones who have control over the direction of our country. We just need to wash the syrup out of our hair and participate. After that, we won't need to bury our heads anymore. Positive change is possible if we work together. I hope you found this talk interesting and helpful and that it gave you a different perspective to think from. Thank you for watching and stay tuned. I'm Sandy, wishing your tomorrow is better than your today.